Hi everybody, Gisele Grenier here from artplace.ca. Well, I'm going to be doing a video here, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear. In the background, I threw some paper down on the floor to keep chaos occupied, so if you all of a sudden hear a whole bunch of scratching and stuff, that's her, not me. Okay, for this background, we're going to do a little bit different. I've got some prepared pieces just to save time. There she goes. We're going to prep this with gesso, and then I'm going to take gesso that I've prepared in a tube and squeeze out to make some kind of like splatters and stuff. Let that dry. Then we're going to scrape color on that, and I've got some pieces to show you. So I've got the Permalba gesso here. It's going to make the page nice and strong, especially when you're going to be building it up with a lot of layers. You do want good strength, especially if you're just using multimedia paper, because it's not the strongest. And I'm just using believe it or not, this is a cutting mat that I found at the store, and it works really great as a no-stick pad for paint. The paper that I had on my table, Joe changed my table because it was starting to warp a little bit because I don't think it was strong enough, so we changed the table. Okay, so I'm going to take this aside. Okay, so we have to let this part dry. Okay, then, bear with me here. Then we're going to take another piece. Oops, that's two. And once that's dry, and this is where you do them a whole bunch of times. So I've got the Permalba gesso in here, but I've added a little bit of flow medium to thin it down a little bit, and I try not to use water because flow medium is actually almost like a thinning agent. You can actually use that to acrylic paint to make it like airbrushing. So I've got it in here, and all you're going to do is do some random stuff. You want the paint to be able to flow, but you want it thick enough. Okay? Like so. That will take a little bit to dry. I like to let it set overnight. And then what you'll have when it's dry, you'll have something like that. Now you probably can't see much of that. Okay, but what we're going to do is first we're going to clear the mat here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to scrape some paint off. So now what you have to think about is, okay, well, what color do you want to scrape? Because we're just doing a mishmash of color, I'm going to use some oranges and some crimson. And this is actually nice if you have paint left over, not something that you're preparing right up front, because you don't need a lot. So if I take some orange, and I'm just going to scrape, and you can start seeing some of that design. You can have the paint, you can scrape it like this, okay, and you can really start seeing that's where all that thick gesso was. Okay, if I take a little bit of crimson, and I can even just put a stripe like this. Again, very little paint. If you put too much paint, it's going to defeat the purpose of what you're doing. Scrape right over the orange. Okay. See? And when you're scraping the paint, it actually goes into the regular gessoed part, and then where it's raised, the actual plastic scraper scrapes some of the paint off, and it leaves a nice texture. You don't have to cover everything up. And then what you can do, see, what I would do with this is really layer it. I can't close this tube. And I can take a rag. That's the wipe that I was using. And if I had a rag full of paint, it's got a little bit of white in it. Okay, so we'll just pretend we're wiping, and then you can also do this, which will lightly stain the paper. But you would wait for this to dry before doing this, because this will also wipe out what you've got there. Alizarin crimson and orange tend to make a nice distressed vintage colors. Just be careful of how much alizarin crimson you use. This mat is a little small. I'm going to have to find my wax paper and put that on there. Okay, you can also remove a little bit of paint here. Not too much. Right on top of those ridges. It's tacking up now. See? Create some really, really interesting effects. And then from here, you would just basically build it up. If I take, well, let's try some yellow. We haven't done much with the yellow. And if I go right on here, now this one here, this is Cad Yellow Light Hue, and it's opaque. It's really bright. But see how you get all those different effects with that, with the texture. Then you can take your wipe, paper towel is what I'm using here, and just go over some of the edges, some of the ridges. And this is a really, really great technique if you're going to layer. Okay, see how I left that broken? So that's a really, really neat thing to do. But, you know, when with all this leftover stuff, I mean, you can actually just go back in here, press, okay, and it puts some texture in there. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do. So it's just a matter of just experimenting. So this is just one color method with the dry gesso, squirting it on, and then you can scrape paint. Then you can build more texture on top of this. And you can do this with any color. Just make sure your table's protected. Okay. And then that'll build another layer of texture. That's why it's important that the actual gesso to prep the page, the multimedia paper for, is really, really strong. Okay, let me just show you one that I have done. Oops, I got a little bit of paint on it. And this here, again, this is just this is 2 layers. I actually just started scraping some paint, which made it light, and then as I was creating additional pages, the leftover paint, like on this one here, I could turn around and just kind of, just right on top. So as the pages are being done, for all the videos, leftover paint, I'm just scraping it onto existing pages. That way there's nothing wasted, and it's very, very random. And I can also take, oh, let's do it with this. Okay, you can scrape the gesso on there as well if you find some areas that are a little too bright. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of this would be a nice thing to do with the kids, and let them make a mess on purpose. So there we go, another background.